getting? I don't know. Well, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 6:01. 6:01, Monday, November 23rd, Republican Caucus. Do the roll call. We have Kevin McCarthy, Paul Arena, Brad Lindmark, John Butita, Gene Crosby, Jim Webster, Jazz Billich, and Steve Schultz. Have I missed anybody?
No, and I just checked in with Mr. Chairman. I apologize for interrupting, but I checked in with Fred, and he's actually not close enough to a computer to get on right now. So he will be joining us today.
All right, that's fine. I just didn't want to move forward unless somebody else was interested. But so we could start going through the committee reports for the board meeting, and then I have some stuff to talk about with our rules of procedure that we're working on. Questions for all of you. So with that, I'm looking at the agenda for tomorrow. Unfinished business. The board appointments are on there again. Does anyone have any discussion on that agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, move on to finance. Who do we have from finance on the call? Steve, can you?
Go ahead.
Or John, whoever.
Go
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. I was absent for about half the meeting, please.
All right. Well, I don't have the agenda up, so just give me the items if you don't mind, Paul.
Nope, not at all. Resolution authorizing execution of collective bargaining agreement with the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police, Labor Council representing deputies in the office of the Winnebago County Sheriff.
Yeah. They were able, with the help of an arbitrator, to actually come to an agreement, a mediator, I'm sorry, not an arbitrator. I think that would have been the next stage. But the increases are 2.25% for the next 3 years. This contract goes back because we've been trying to get them to an agreement for a year past the expiration date of the last contract. So this actually goes back to the previous fiscal year. So October 2019 is when it begins. It's a 3-year contract. As I said, it's 2.25 is the salary increase. They also have some increases in some changes in the health insurance and the co-pays as to the contribution that the FOP employees will now make toward their health insurance coverage. And it's more in line with the other contracts that we have and the other union employees that the county has. And that was a significant achievement as it related to David Karlinkas's report about this contract. So those were the big pieces that I can recall coming out. Any questions about that?
I have a question. So the increase year to year, do we know a dollar amount it'll increase the sheriff's budget?
Yeah, they did. They had those numbers. It was over $1 million for the 3-year period. And, it's progressive. So the biggest of the 3 years is the last year, of course. I want to say it was like, this is off the top of my head, so a little dangerous, but I think it was 200 and some thousand for the first year, 300 and some thousand for the second year, and 500 and some thousand for the third year. And that's at least taking a run at it, but sorry that I don't have more specifics on it.
No, that's okay. Just who else has questions, comments on this? It was approved unanimously in finance?
It was. I mean, the recognition historically, especially for you newer board members, is that if the contract goes to arbitration, they have been using McHenry County as the comparative county, and that has been terrible for us. And as a result, if we can come to some agreement apart from going to arbitration, that is the desire, to get that done. The other thing, just again, for new folks, one of the more significant items that ends up impacting the annual overall cost increase from these contracts is not the 2.25% inflation adjustment, but it's the step increases. And so, again, this is off the top of my head, but as of 2018, they had done a chart that showed here were the percentage increases year over year. And for the sheriff's department, union employees, and it was up over 7% as the effective salary increase year over year. That was the average over that period of that was charted. And I can try to dig that chart out to pass that along to you all. But the point is, it's really the step increases that are built into these contracts. And the way it's been described to me is, yeah, but that's just how those contracts for all those law enforcement folk are always written. And that's just the way it is. We saw just recently that the sheriff gave promotions to folks. Obviously, that's going to be an impact in terms of the budget and the spending as well.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. Not a question, more a comment. Absolutely correct. This is horrible that we have these increases automatically coming, and we do need to deal with it.
Yes. Yeah, so, it's something that we can start the budget conversation now to address, either in reducing the number of deputies to meet, what we've been spending, or find a revenue source to pay for the additional expenditure. Any
Mr.
other-
Chairman,
Go ahead.
just a question. So for the 3 years, and Steve, I'm sure you could answer this. So it's 1 year already, so it was going to be prorated within the next 2 years. Is that correct?
So what happens is they get the back pay. So they get a windfall for the 2.25% for
Mhm.
last year. And, that number was budgeted, at least pretty close to the amount. Now that those books have been closed, so I'm guessing that just comes out of fund balance. But then in the current year, they'll get, I guess, back pay to October 1st. And then, from there forward, it's just the current rate with
Okay, now
those. Yeah.
would we deal with this again in 2 more years?
We'll deal with it again, and depending on the ability to actually negotiate a contract and the successful negotiation of that, I'm telling you that it's over a year overdue. We may or may not. I guess this is part also of our history where we frequently don't actually have a contract when the previous contract expires.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on this agenda item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next resolution authorizing settlement of a claim against the County of Winnebago entitled Fred Jones versus Winnebago County, in the amount of $30,839.47.
Yeah, on this one there was no dispute that the injury for the deputy occurred on the job. My recollection is it was a hand injury, and it was in the trying to deal with subduing, somebody that was perpetrator. I'm not getting the word, forgive me, but there wasn't any dispute about it. They negotiated it down to this level, and it was recommended by the outside attorney who had done the work on it.
Any questions or comments on that item? All right, Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Steve. Zoning, Mr. Webster, do you have anything to?
No, once again, we won't have anything. And just as a reminder, our zoning committee meeting will be in February. So we should have something coming at us at the end of February, our second meeting in February. I will likely have some things to read into the record for that 2-week layover.
Thank you. Economic Development, Mr. Billich.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For economic development, we just had one resolution. It was a resolution authorizing a grant of $80,000 to Awaken 815 NFP to assist with their Awaken 815 culinary. This program was something that actually turns out had involvement from other board members prior to both my tenure and prior to me as the chairman on the Economic Development Committee. So it was something that was brought up. There was quite a few different members that were involved with helping this group out. What they're doing is basically City of Rockford and through TIF zones and enterprise zones have committed to about $400,000 to helping rehab and fix up the Imperial Palace that's on State Street, and that's been empty for quite a while now. And they came to us to ask for $80,000, which would go $40,000 would go towards a purchase of a hood, and then the other 40,000 towards rehab for the roof. And this group, I guess this program that they're starting is actually going to be a non-for-profit schooling system to teach culinary works for people that their primary focus is going to be on people that have either had hardships in their life or they have passed rehab. They're working with different groups here locally, different other non-for-profits to try to get people some jobs. That they're also tied in with another group that actually also teaches construction portion of it, but that's on a separate entity, not in regards to this one. And so they've actually had a lot of support from the city and a lot of support from different municipal partners. I would like to actually talk to them a little bit more and try to see if they can get more work and cohesiveness with other restaurants in the area. Currently, we're up to about 6 that are going to be shut down for good after this whole COVID shutdown stuff that's been going on this year. So it's going to be a lot of other smaller restaurants, mom and pop shops that are going to be struggling to try to make ends meet. This is a great program. Hopefully they don't run just a massive restaurant that's going to be basically paid by the taxpayers, but at the same time, what their intention is actually a very good intention. It did pass unanimously through the board. There wasn't any issues. There was a lot of support for it.
Thank you. So this is from host fees. That's where this money's coming from?
Correct. This is from host fees, and this is a non-for-profit, so this is one of those one-time gifts, not a tied to a business or anything.
Not a loan, right? They're not paying it back. We're just a grant.
No, which actually in regards to just if there's no other questions on this, I'll move on to the other portion, which actually I did get word that Village of Pecatonica is going to actually be coming forward to us to have some updates that they want to do. They're going to be actually going through our loan process, and so they're going to take out loans to do some construction work to beautifying their downtown area. But we'll talk about that later. That's still in the works.
Okay.
As far as this one goes, I don't know if there was any other questions from any board members.
Does any member have a question for Mr. Billich on this program? Okay, seeing none. Was there anything else from economic development? You said Pecatonica might be coming through with the loan program. Is that?
Yeah, that's still in the works. I got more information about it a couple weeks ago. I'll be actually meeting with their village president just to kind of help with the process and see what other projects they have up and coming, so we can help them out with that too.
Have you heard what we should be expecting to receive in taxes from the sale of the marijuana?
I'm sorry?
Have you heard what we might receive in tax revenue from the marijuana sales? Have you heard anything on that?
No, actually, I haven't heard anything on that because the state, I guess, has not been paying out the cities yet. They have finally reported on the state tax website, which I've actually gone through. I don't have those notes with me right now, but I can actually forward an email to the rest of you and with a link to that website as well, which is a public information website. And it kind of gives you like a breakdown. It was hard to kind of find, but I found the numbers that I was looking for. And it gives kind of the breakdown based upon our tax rates that we applied towards the marijuana sales. I want to say that ours, when I checked it out, that was I want to say that was through the month of August, and we had generated just off of our small percentage that we have, which is the 3%. Just off of that alone, I believe the generation or the money that we would be paid out was upwards to about $20,000.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other board member comments or questions about economic development? Okay, we'll move on. We also want to mention, let the record reflect that Mr. Kelly has joined us. I should have done that earlier.
And Aaron Booker is on board now too.
Okay, and Aaron Booker, great. You're just in time. There's no committee report for operations or public works. We're up to public safety. So go ahead, Mr. Booker, you're on.
Thank you, Chairman. It looks like we've got a couple of resolutions, and the first resolution is authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to agreement between Winnebago County and Remedies Renewing Lives for the Justice for Families grant. Any questions or concerns, comments on that?
So this was just a grant that that they've obtained, and it cost the county nothing, right?
Correct. Cost county nothing, and our court services people are writing grants to get these, or the grant writer over there is getting these wonderful grants, so it's all plus for it.
Yeah, she does a great job.
And the other resolution is approving an updated intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, for the operation and funding of the Winnebago County Emergency Telephone System. That was worked out with Chief Bergston with Rockford City, Steve Chapman, and such. They got a really good agreement worked out there again.
Do you recall if there was an increase in our obligation in this contract?
No, I'm sorry, I don't recall if there was an increase.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that item? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Booker.
That's
is
all,
that it, or
all
is
I
there-
have on.
Go ahead. Did you have anything else?
No, that's it for the public safety.
Okay, thank you. Personnel and Policies Committee. Anyone want to take that? I can go over what I recall. So the first resolution is authorizing the execution of a renewal agreement with Arthur J. Gallagher for the property casualty and workers' compensation coverage. I don't recall this having any controversy around it, but I also can't recall if it was an increase in the rates. Mr. Webster, do you recall on this one? Or Mr. Kelly, you're on that committee also.
Don't recall any rate increase, but the discussion was this is something that's routinely done year after year.
Okay.
Can I speak up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please do.
Is this the one that was multifaceted? It covered the general liability and was that the one we're talking about now?
Property casualty and workers' compensation.
Yeah, that was actually a huge increase. It was
Right.
it was 10%. It was a 10% increase, and so my request to Mr. Thompson was that when this comes up for review, because they were using the COVID as part of the explanation for the dramatic increase, it was like $105,000 increase. And if they're using that as the rationale for this year's increase, when we talk to them a year from now, I asked him to make sure that we bring that up and see if there's any kind of a break we could get going the other direction if we have a better situation related to COVID.
That is a good point. We'll have to make sure we follow up on that. I'll try to keep a note on that item. Any further discussion on that issue? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. These next two are changes to the ordinances related to the Chief Financial Officer and the Human Resources Director. And it just clarifies that these positions are appointed by the administrator and report to the administrator. They're hired with the advice and consent of the board, but their employment continues at the pleasure of the administrator. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about these items? Mr. Butita?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it won't surprise anybody that I think this board should address the county board chairman responsibilities. The money that's going to be paid to our next county board chairman and the responsibilities that are assigned as of right now. So I'm in favor of the position of the chief financial officer. I'm going to hold my vote to a no, because I think we need a bigger discussion about the county board chairman.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment on it? Ms. Crosby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with Mr. Butita. When I look at the amount of, we were within 10% of having the memorandum or pass, and I believe there's a lot of constituents out there that are dynamically concerned about the role of the chairman. And so I'm on the same page as John. We do need a bigger discussion, and it needs to be in an open environment and debated on merit and nothing more than that. Typically, we debate things on personalities and character versus the merit of the situation. And so I would like to see this debated on merit and have a broader conversation. So I thank Mr. Butita for bringing it up. I don't want to be a boat rocker, but I do think it hasn't been fleshed out correctly, and it needs to be. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone else like to comment? So two things. Mr. Thompson has identified a candidate to be CFO, someone who he feels has excellent qualifications. Mr. Schultz was involved in that interview process, so he could probably speak better to the individual's qualifications, but he'd like to move forward as soon as possible. And he asked if we would suspend the rules tomorrow and approve these two changes so that he could bring forward the candidate as soon as possible. Would anybody object to that, to getting that done? Okay. And the other thing I just want to make everyone aware of is I've met now with Chairman-elect Chiarelli a couple times, and at the first meeting, I went with the copy of the duties of the administrator and the duties of the chairman, and that at that time he was fine with it the way it is. And then I met again with him and Mr. Thompson, and again there was no complaint from Chairman-elect Chiarelli about the duties. I think has a different focus than Chairman Haney did, and so maybe he's going to approach the job in a different way. I'm not saying that to say we can't have a discussion as you've requested. I think that's great, but I just want you to know I did try to start that conversation or just provide the opportunity if there was going to be some conflict, and there was not. Moving forward, I'm sure we can continue with the conversation. Ms. Crosby.
Thank you, Chairman Arena. I appreciate that. The mere fact that we mentioned Shirley versus Haney puts the personalities back into play. I would like the discussion based on the merits of the office versus who was there and who's there now. That's my whole point here. It's not about personalities. It's not about the individual. It's really about the office. And I thank you for wanting to have further discussion. And I think it needs to be open and transparent. Thank you.
So just so that I understand, what action would you, are you asking me to do something to move this forward, or is it, I mean, we can talk about it here in caucus whenever you like. We can put it on the agenda, or we can have like a joint caucus, I suppose, and talk about it. What forum are you thinking about for this discussion to take place?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it needs to be in a caucus. I'm not sure it needs to be with key players in our community, business leaders that have a say. As I said, we were within 10% of the vote. And so there's a lot of people out there that think it does have merit. And at the end of the day, if we end up where we are right now, or if we end up with something else, I think we need to be inclusive, not only with the county board and the separate caucuses, but also with the community and get their read on what they want. It's not about us, guys. It's about them. And that's the difference. So that's my answer, Paul. I don't know if that helps or not.
Well, I'm always open to conversation on any issue. So when you'd like to move forward and there's something specific I can do, just let me know. I'm open to putting it together in whatever form you decide.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, with that, is there any other conversation about our board meeting agenda? All right, seeing none, I have some stuff in other matters that I'd like to discuss with everybody for our transition and our rules of procedure. I'm having conversations with Mr. Hoffman about various things, and I've had conversations with Chairman-elect Shirelli, with some of you also. So I just want to run some stuff by everyone and see what you think. The first thing I would like to do is a while ago, I think Mr. Kurlinkus brought to my attention that there is an expert on parliamentary procedure who lives here in town. And I thought when I came on the board, I wasn't as familiar as I could be with, proper parliamentary procedure. And I think I still am not completely where I should be. So I checked with this woman. Her name's Nancy Sylvester. I've talked to some board members, and some of us were already familiar with her. She can do a 3-hour training, answer questions for us on a Saturday morning by Zoom. She's available the weekends between Thanksgiving and Christmas, December 5th, 12th, or 19th. So if we schedule something, is there anybody who is unavailable any of those dates? Or are you not interested in it? I suppose you don't have to do it. It's just, we're just making it available for those who are interested. Crosby?
She's an excellent instructor. I've known Nancy Sylvester for 30 years, and you'll never get a better mind or someone that can communicate the whole process better than she can. So I'm in complete support of it. Nicely done.
Thank you. Mr. Butita?
Thank you. So we did discuss this, and I'm in complete agreement that she's well qualified to do this. This would be for the entire board, though, wouldn't it, Paul?
Right.
Not just our caucus.
Yeah, Mr. Hoffman's talking to the Democrats about dates tonight too. So we're going to pick the day that the most people can participate.
All right, that works. Good. Good idea.
Mr. Kelly? You're muted, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. I've seen numerous mistakes made during board meetings with regard to parliamentary procedure. And I've been part of Nancy Sylvester's instructions before. As chair of the Libertarian Party of Illinois, and she is excellent. And she was parliamentarian at our state conventions, and she really knows Robert's rules. And we ought to be operating by Robert's rules, and we have not been.
Right. Yeah, well, I agree, we need to get it dialed in. So all of those dates, there's nobody has any conflicts with any of those dates? No preferences? Okay, that's helpful. Mr. Butita?
Just one thing came to to mind, Paul, is, so our parliamentarian at our meetings is the state's attorney's office. We should include them in this also, I would think.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
I did let Chairman-elect Shirelli know, and he's on board and he'll participate, and I'll call Dave Kurlinkus tomorrow and see what his schedule looks like.
thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on that item? Okay, one thing that's always been concerning to me is the when things get rushed through, business gets rushed through. There's times when we've had committee meetings the week of the county board meeting, and I think that that's it just creates a short time for us to truly absorb the facts of an issue and come to an understanding. So as part of the change in the rules of procedure, they say right now, I think the wording is whenever possible, there should not be committee meetings the week of the board meeting. I'd like to remove those words whenever possible and just say there's no committee meetings the week of the board meeting. If there's an emergency, we can always suspend the rules for something that's urgent, but I want to get away from that happening as often as it has happened. Does anyone have a Mr. Webster?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We've had this discussion over the years there about why the zoning committee meets when it does, which is the second Wednesday of the month, obviously the night before county board meeting. And due to time constraints and so forth, that's the only time it makes sense to have one, because the zoning board of appeals has to meet prior to the zoning committee. So after the zoning board of appeals meets, then it takes the staff that following week to get their minutes together and to get the packets of information together for the zoning committee. And so to change the zoning committee's meeting evening, we'd have to change the zoning board of appeals meeting as well to give staff ample time to do their job about putting the results of the zoning board of appeals together to present to us. Now, having said all that, oftentimes we have suspended the rules on a zoning issue when it comes into the full board. So to alleviate that, if there's, that's why we have that 2-week layover. So even though I bring the results of a zoning committee meeting to you the following night after our meeting, when I read those into the record, they can lay over. Most times, the only time we suspend typically is if it comes from zoning board of appeals with unanimous approval, no objections, and from zoning committee with unanimous approval and no objections. And so if anyone objects along the way, we leave it lay over, which is what we typically do. So what I'm saying to you is, even though our meeting is the night before a board meeting, read it into the record, let it lay over, stay the course on letting it lay over. In that 2-week period before it gets voted on at the next meeting, then board members have 2 full weeks to query myself or the zoning staff about any questions or problems they may have. And so that's why the wording to say absolutely no meetings the week of board is probably not a smart thing to do.
Okay. Ms. Crosby? You're muted, Ms. Crosby.
Thank you. Mr. Webster's committee is has always been true to what's important as far as what needs to be laid over and what needs to be suspended. He has always been forthright and honest and given us plenty of time to think about controversial matters. He's absolutely right. In certain situations, we need to suspend the rules. So when we take away whenever possible, we put him in an absolute box, and he's not the abuser. The abuser is personnel and policies, finance on occasion, operations on occasion, public safety on occasion. It is not zoning. So if we could craft some language here that would protect his committee and hold everyone else's feet to the fire, I'd be for that. But he is absolutely correct, and we need to be supportive of what he has perpetrated in the past and continues. If the zoning board of appeals agrees with something or doesn't agree with them, Jim Webster as a chairman has always been absolutely forthright and honest and says, I don't care if you lay it over, but in this situation, it probably should be suspended. And I trust his wisdom and his knowledge and his committee. So I'm opposed to whatever possible, but I also understand, Paul, where you're coming from, because things have been slam dunked and they shouldn't have been. So there has to be some kind of happy medium in here that protects zoning, but holds everybody else's feet to the fire. So if I could, if I look at an amendment and say whenever possible except zoning, it just doesn't look good. So I don't know how to craft that, but I sure would like to protect Mr. Webster's committee.
Okay. And
if Jim, if you have any suggestions, I welcome them.
Okay, Mr. Webster, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Gene, thank you for your support and your words that you have spoken in favor of this. Aside from my meeting, there are times when we've had to have committee meetings. Sometimes something comes up and it has to be dealt with. I can't think of anything right offhand, but sometimes that has happened. That's why we've had committee meetings unexpectedly. And if something has to be taken care of right away, we do that. If not, then we would have to probably hold a special board meeting. If something has to happen that fast and we can't deal with it that week, then we'd have to have a special board meeting the following week. Now, that's just something I'm tossing out there to you. I think so we need to be careful about the wording. And so if we avoid that, by all means, if we avoid that, it's just like we avoid, or we should try to avoid, having budget amendments come in. After that budget's set, we should be able to live by that budget, instead of having budget amendments. But getting back to the zoning things and so forth there, generally speaking, the reason that we would suspend rules is because there's no confrontation along the way. But the other reason for suspending rules, particularly this time of year, is that the zoning process from start to finish is a lengthy process. It's like 3 months from the time someone walks in the zoning office, the staff office there, and applies for a zoning permit or a map amendment or what have you. That lengthy process takes about 3 months. And so at this time of year, when you're getting into the season is closing in on any construction projects and so forth, that extra week that someone has to wait, look at what's our weather coming at us right now? So this week, if a guy had a chance to pour some cement, he would appreciate not having to wait till next week, when maybe by then things are froze up, and this project is froze up then until springtime. So sometimes there's reasons why we suspend, but once again, we only do it if everything's unanimous along the way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Ms. Crosby?
The only thing I can add is the reason you're concerned, Chairman, and as well as everybody else, is there's been an overwhelming abuse of suspending the rules. And my question is, can we alter these procedures midterm, or do we only have now to alter them? If
No,
we
we
can
can-
alter them midterm, then we can put everybody on notice that if you abuse the privilege and don't abide by common sense and giving everyone an opportunity to think through the issues, then we're going to come down hard and we'll add language that says whenever possible. So can we do a probationary period or not? That's my question.
I don't know if we should do a probationary period. I think, and just so that we're all clear, I have a list here of suggestions, not saying that we'll do all these things, and we might do some, not, others in different ways. So I think from what we've heard here, zoning on a routine basis needs to meet the week of the board meeting, but no other committee has to do it regularly. Other
Correct.
committees may need to do it on an emergency basis, which allows us to suspend the rules and deal with that. So that would be the method to deal with, something unexpected coming up. I'll
Well, I
talk.
can
Go ahead.
concur with that, as long as zoning's protected. And if we have an emergency, boy, define that. But if we have an emergency, then we can suspend. I'm good with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's suspending the rules. We do it all the time for all variety of reasons. These are just guidelines to conduct business, and on an as needed basis, we can change it. And to your question, I believe we can change the rules at any time. I think it might take a higher vote count to change them, other than now at the new term. So
Mr. Chairman,
yes, go ahead, Mr. Schultz.
yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, I think the larger issue is retraining staff. So the way they deal with and approach the committees is to require the time allowed. I don't think this is an issue related to the committees. I think this is an issue related to staff. And the likelihood of having items that will be an emergency will be greater if we allow them to believe that that's permissible. So I think that the retraining is not at the board level, it's at the staff level. And I believe Mr. Thompson can provide leadership in this regard with direction from Mr. Arena and, hopefully Mr. Hoffman as well. But the other point I'd make is that, we're talking about suspending the rules, but suspending the rules only have to do with ordinance and zoning. So resolutions come forward routinely to the board that are on the agenda, and they're put on the agenda, a few days before. So I just wanted to point out that we're spending a lot of time on suspending the rules, but resolutions don't require that. The larger issue then is again, get things on our plate and in front of us earlier. Don't allow staff to believe that the way they do business is you just bring it in and in the next week we're going to get it approved. that's going to be where the culture change has to happen, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. So the next item I have here, idea, addresses the comments that Mr. Schultz just made. This was developed through my conversation with Joe Shirelli based on how the city council conducts business. So put in our rules that all drafts of resolutions and ordinances are sent to the board in their finished form by 5 p.m. on Friday, the week prior to the committee week. So in our packet for committees, we get the draft of the resolution or ordinance. If it's an ordinance amending existing law, that we also receive a red line version, not just the finished product, so we can see what changes are being made, and an executive summary of one paragraph or as much as needed to give us an explanation of what it's about. So this would, in terms of getting staff retrained, this would require them to have the work complete by that point in time. Sometimes we'll get an agenda with just a brief, a few words description and not see the actual finished product until, just before committees, the day before, 2 days before. Joe Shirelli said this worked well in the city council to help them be better prepared for their committee meetings by not having stuff put on their plate in the last minute. How's everyone feel about that? Any comments or questions on that? Ms. Crosby gives it the thumbs up.
Yeah, you have my complete support. Nicely done.
Okay. So, maybe that change alone remedies the no committee, to say no committees are scheduled the week of the board. This draft requirement fixes that. And I think that would then not interfere with zoning either. Another item that was mentioned that came from the city of Rockford City Council is they have a rule that any item that comes for a first reading to the board floor, so I guess this would affect resolutions because our ordinances already lay over, but by a motion and a second of a member, the item lays over till the next city council meeting. So what this would do is, and there's no, it's not debatable. It's just, all it takes is a motion and a second. This would give us, a board member who has a problem with a particular resolution coming through would have the opportunity to get, 2 weeks to continue to work on the issue. I'm not sure how I feel about it myself. But I think it provides an opportunity for a member who's maybe outnumbered on an issue to get another chance to work on it. Any thoughts on that idea, Mr. Webster?
Yeah, thank you. I guess my thought on there is if we did that, then that would lay over for 2 weeks. Whereas the city council, they meet every week, don't they?
No, they meet every 2 weeks.
Every
They're on
two?
the same as us, committees and then council.
Okay.
So it would only affect resolutions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we already lay over ordinances.
You're right. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Right. Like I said, these are just ideas for conversation. I don't know what feedback Mr. Hoffman's going to get from the Democrats. I'm not sure if I talked to him about all these things, but these came out of conversations with Joe Shirelli and running it by everyone. Mr. Billich, go ahead.
The only thing, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I would add to maybe that one, or maybe as an alteration to that, is due to the fact that there might be a chance where somebody's trying to delay something and they're just not gonna, they're not doing it out of, they're not doing it to figure out more information, but doing it out of malice. I would actually say that you would limit for the first and the second being the only way to lay it over for one meeting, but then make sure that actually the board has to vote on the layover on the next one.
Oh, yeah, it's only a one-time deal. You can only do it once.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I didn't know. I didn't catch that part.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't think I said it, but yeah, it's just a one-time layover. It's not available. So just something to think about, and you can send an email or give me a call if you want to, if you think about something else with that. Is there any other, Ms. Crosby, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a good idea. I think the more eyes that have an opportunity to look at something, and it's only one layover, 2 weeks isn't the alpha and the omega. It's a very short period of time, and I think it's prudent. And I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, something to discuss. The next one that I just want to run by you. and this is
Mr.
kind of-
Butita,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Butita.
Go ahead. My question is going to be what's our timeline on all this, but go ahead and finish your comments first, Paul.
So we adopted new rules at our first meeting on, do we meet on December 7th, the day everyone's sworn in, and then meet again on the 10th, or is it just on the 10th? Did anyone recall?
I got a schedule that we meet on both days.
Yeah, there's
Right.
something, yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, there's something noted about what John just mentioned after on the December 7th day.
Right, so that's when we adopt the new rules. I'm thinking it's on the 7th, so we have until then to make these changes. But like I said, I think we can make changes at other times. If we decide we don't want to do this now, we'll do it, we can do it later, I believe. So, the next one is a big one. So I don't know if, and I'm just for conversation again, our committees are advisory. So an idea can come through the committee process, everyone could vote against it, and it still moves to the floor. In other legislative bodies, something has to get a majority approval in committee for it to move to the floor. I did talk about this in the past with Chairman Haynes. He brought up the point of, well, we don't want committees to hold up important stuff, which I understand. The way that's dealt with in, like, say, the Chicago City Council is that a motion can be made on the floor for an item that's been held in committee to come to the floor. So there is a mechanism to prevent that from happening. What this change would do is it would stop things that are not fully developed, I guess, or not, not fully developed, I guess is the right way to say it, from coming to the floor. What are your thoughts on that? Mr.
Yeah, I'd weigh in on that one,
Okay.
if I might. Thank you,
Go ahead,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Wilson and Mr. Baldwin.
Yeah, I really believe that the board is held hostage the way it's handled now, where if a committee says no to something emphatically, we still are forced to deal with it as an entire board under the present system. And that doesn't make sense to me, especially when you're saying it's a simple majority at the board level to actually take the issue up for a vote. If that's the case, then, that's a pretty low hurdle to overcome if it just so happens that the members on the committee are the ones opposed, but the rest of the board is for it. Well, you solve that by the 51%, you'll take it up on the board floor.
Ms. Crosby, you have a comment?
yeah, I'm a little bit confused, I guess. So say again, Paul, what you just said, so I can get my head around it.
So most legislative bodies that I was familiar with, an item's in committee and it doesn't get a majority vote, it stays in committee. Our committees are just advisory, so it comes to our floor and they'll say, okay, everyone voted against it, but it's for you for debate anyway. I think if stuff had to stay in committee until it got a majority, if there's problems with an idea, those problems would get ironed out in committee. And so the Chicago City Council works that way. The state of Illinois legislature works that way. And I'm pretty sure the Rockford City Council works that way. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. So apparently, this proposal would empower the committees to totally reject a proposal.
Unless the majority of the board wants it to come to the floor for debate. So if a committee rejects it, and then a motion is made by, say, the sponsor of the piece of legislation on the floor, and they get a second, then there'll be a vote on the floor. And if the majority of the whole board says, yes, we want this to come forward, then it moves from committee to the floor. And I'm just throwing this stuff out for conversation, so nobody has to make any decisions now. Ms. Crosby?
You know, I concur with Mr. Schultz and yourself to a certain point. The only time that I have seen a different direction that should be taken, I love you, Jim, but it's in zoning. The Zoning Board of Appeals will vote unanimously for something, and then the zoning board unanimously tubes it. So then it's presented to the board and they vote. That's the only committee that I have a concern about. I think you're right. Every organization, association that I have been involved with, if it doesn't come out of committee, it doesn't come out of committee and it's a dead issue, period. So I get that. But when it comes to zoning, and the zoning committee can tube a unanimous vote from the Zoning Board of Appeals, I kind of have an issue with that. So I'm kind of, you know, I don't know what I want on this one.
All right, well, it's just something to think about. Mr. Webster?
Thank you. The most we've talked about zoning in a long time. The one thing I will say about zoning versus things that come out of other committees. Before it comes out of zoning committee, it has to go through Zoning Board of Appeals first. So you have that step there that other committees do not have, okay? And on most of the other committees, things are pretty much black and white decisions to be made, you know? And most things in most of our other committees, everything revolves, I've said this before, it revolves around the dollar, okay? Everything revolves around the dollar. How much are we spending for this, this or that, or whatever, okay? So things are more cut and dried, so to speak. Zoning is a different creature because so much of the decisions that come out of zoning, particularly at the Zoning Board of Appeals level, are very subjective. And by that, I mean, when they have to go through the findings of fact, and the findings of fact for a special use permit, for example, they have to find that they are in total agreement with all of the findings of fact to approve something. Okay, so that one of the findings of fact says it has to provide pure light and air and so forth like that. And so that's subjective. So one member of that committee might say, no, I don't think so. I think it's a stinky operation. It doesn't provide pure light and air. And the other committee member says, no, I've seen that thing before and I think the air is fine. So these are the types of decisions that are made at the zoning that are subjective. And so that's why when the zoning committee looks at what the zoning board of appeals did, sometimes we may think that they took that subjective opinion a little bit too far, maybe. And the other thing is, many, many years ago, when I first got on board, because I was on zoning board of appeals for a good number of years before I went on the board. And one of the board members then told me, because I played hardcore at zoning board of appeals as well, I went by the book every time. So he says to me, Jim, we want to get this thing passed or whatever. And I said, no. I said, I wouldn't vote for that ZBA, so I'm not going to vote for it now. He goes, Jim, what do you got to realize now? He says, is you're not bound by those hardcore decisions now. He said, now you're in the political arena. And he said, and you'll see that you're going to get a lot of push and pull from political people and so forth, and people that want to get something done that no other people, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And so that's why I say to you, and I'm sure Jazz can back that up. He's seen this happen before as well. He was also on zoning board of appeals. And so getting back to that subjective thing there, that's what makes the zoning such a different creature as other committees, I think. That's one of the things. And so what I'm saying here is, I think that what you're talking about killing something and not bringing it to the board for other committees, that may be fine. For zoning, I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. But I'm a team player. I'll go with whatever the majority wants.
Well, this is kind of a big change, so it's something for us to think about, and we'll just continue the conversation. I'll see what how Mr. Hoffman feels about it after his caucus meeting. The last item, and this came from Mr. Hoffman, is participation by non-committee members in committee meetings. And so Mr. Hoffman feels that it's been confusing where we all sit around the table on a committee meeting, and I assume, God willing, soon we'll be back to normal meetings. So we'll be, in that environment again. And he says, you hardly know who's on the committee and who's not, and that non-committee members are competing for time to discuss an issue with committee members. And when I was speaking with Nancy Sylvester this morning about the training, she was asking me questions about our rules of procedure. And I brought this question up to her because Joe had just talked to me about it a little bit before. And she said that it's improper to allow non-committee members to participate in the meeting. He said the table should just have the committee members on it. All of those committee members should be able to have all of their questions answered or go through the discussion. And then if another member wants to ask a question, she said it's done by the discretion of the committee, not the committee chairman. So the whole committee has to agree that, I or Mr. Webster or somebody in the gallery can ask further questions. So I think Robert's rules would require us to do it in this way, different than we've done it over the past 2 years. So does anyone object to that or have comments on that? Mr. Butita?
Excuse me, I would favor that. I think that would, because the committee is structure is where we want to gain information, as the committee members who are charged with that responsibility. Possibly if other members of the board want to address that committee, they should sign up as speakers to that committee as, under the form that we've already have established. So that's a possibility. But I like your idea about restricting it, though.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Hoffman feels very strongly about this, so I think it's likely that we'll clarify that rule. Okay, I think, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. The only other thing that I want to discuss with Mr. Hoffman is we have vice chairs for committees. I think that the vice chair should receive the same information about, what's on the agenda for the committee meeting as the chair, because, there's been times where a chair might, work late and come to the meeting 15 minutes after it begins, and the vice chair has to run the meeting, but maybe they're not up to speed on the issues that are before the committee. So this is just a matter of copying the vice chair on all the communications between staff and the chair of the committee. And maybe I would encourage the committee chairs to rely more on their vice chairs to get them involved in the matters before the committee. So it's just sharing the workload. All of us, or a lot of us, work other jobs and, could probably use a hand on occasion. I think, some of the committees, I don't even know who the vice chair is. So I want us up front here. I think we should make sure we name all our vice chairs and make sure those vice chairs are included, and allow encourage the committee chairs to work more closely with their vice chairs. Ms. Crosby?
Thank you, Paul. That's a great recommendation. I completely concur.
Thank you. All right. That's it for me. As I said, these are ideas. Think about them. We can do some, none, all of them. I don't know. But we'll be adopting our rules of procedure in December. Go ahead, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. If I may, are you done with your portion, Paul?
I am. I'm done.
Okay, I just want to share this with you. I got a call this morning. I'll tell you, it was from Bob Prosser. Do you guys know who Bob Prosser is from Hoffman House Restaurant? Okay, well, Bob called this morning to tell me that Friday the health department shut him down abruptly. And so he was very upset about that, which I totally understand. And we had quite a long conversation, but part of it there that upset him was behind him or next to him, whatever, there's another restaurant there that didn't get shut down. And so he said, he's upset that they're getting shut down for these reasons of, I don't know, maybe having too many people or for whatever the reasons are. But if another restaurant acts the same way and don't get shut down, that's not right. And so what he's saying is, hey, you know what? If you're going to shut one down, shut them all down. And so it's not right just to do one and not another there. And the other thing there about it there was it's getting kind of heavy-handed there. Now here it is Thanksgiving, which all these places are hurting. We all know that. They're all hurting big time. And so to shut them down at Thanksgiving, a lot of families there traditionally get together at one another's home, whatever, but a lot of them don't. So a lot of people choose just to go out for Thanksgiving. Well, you're hurting these people more than ever. And when I see this happening day after day in the news, yesterday's news, a woman sold her house to keep her business afloat. My gosh, how, what kind of extremes are we going to with this? We're going to have half of our businesses shut down, our economy shut down. They're not going to garner any more taxes, no more sales taxes. And, that's going to hurt the hell out of all of us there. And the other thing, I just want to say this. Last week, I saw on the news where Severson was on there, and he was quoted. He said, what sense does this make that you can put 300 people on a plane and fly them around for 3 hours, yet you can't have 10 people at a funeral? Where is it makes no sense. And so it's getting really heavy-handed. with the direction we have to follow from the health department. And the health department is following everything that Governor Pritzker is saying. So it's getting pretty tough. So part of it there and I've heard the same thing from others that call me too. And what they say is, you guys, the county board, you got to do something about this. You guys are the ones in charge and all this, and you guys need to control their budget and that. And I have to share this with them. We don't control their budget. The health department is funded through state funding, not through county funding. And so what's Sandra's duty then, duty bound, whatever, she better follow Pritzker's orders, or Pritzker might pull the funding to the health department. Maybe that's why things are coming off the way they are. I don't know. I just know that I've heard more phone calls, more complaints on this issue than any issue since I've ever been on the county board.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Mr. Webster. I have Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Billich.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a tension between the county board and the public health, a tension between individual rights and public health. And I don't know how to resolve it, and I don't think anybody does. But that's where the tension is. People need to have a right to make their living, but there is a compelling interest in government to the welfare of public health as well.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Billich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kelly brings up a decent point, but I definitely want to go back and touch on what Mr. Webster said. And he is absolutely right. And I'm not going to harp about it too much more. I think I've spent a lot of time harping about it, and not on behalf of just myself. I'm talking about the other restaurants. There's over 6 already that have shut down forever. Mr. Webster is absolutely right. There are multiple people that have taken out second mortgages just to make it through this. And now at this stage, this is the thing that really is bothering a lot of restaurants. And just to clarify on Mr. Webster's part, there was a lot of restaurants that had multiple violations that got served orders. There also was false representation as far as who got violations as well. I know of 2 places that were told they got violations, even though they never got a written violation, never got any violation emailed to them. And still they got shown, there was somebody that showed up to their restaurant with a order to shut down by the health department. And that was absolutely wrong. I know of one place that fought it and was able to get a hold of Todd Marshall, and they actually made their discussion. Valid points were made to the point where Todd Marshall even backed his guy off and said, no, you don't have an, you're absolutely right. You didn't get any. So we're at the stage where now we're even seeing that portion of it. Now, in regards to what Mr. Webster said, as far as certain other restaurants and a lot of issues that the restaurants have had now is because they feel like their voice is not heard. To go to Mr. Kelly's point, absolutely, Mr. Kelly. And there's going to be a lot of restaurants that are going to try to combat the health department because they've already done the shutdown period. They've already shown that it wasn't the restaurants that spread it. And they've already shown, I won't even say the restaurants that didn't spread it. I'll say that it was such a, if it spread anywhere from a restaurant, it was so small to even be measured on that scale. And the problem that we have right now is that the main type of business that has the most rules and regulations that the state can come down on, and that the cities and even the local health department facilities that they have can come down on, is the restaurant industry and the service industry. So therefore, we're seeing the most pressure on them. And I don't think, absolutely, like Mr. Webster said, I don't think it's right that 10,000 people a day can touch the same gas handle. But I can't serve a meal on a disinfected plate at a disinfected table in a disinfected chair with disinfected utensils. So I do think there is a blockage there, and I have discussed with Mr. Dornbush and the economic development. We'll be having a couple other things coming through there in regards to COVID, and definitely we're going to need to reassess our way of COVID help, because that first loan portion of it didn't reach a lot of restaurants, and nor did it make a difference for those restaurants. And there are some of them that actually folded because maybe they were newer restaurants and weren't able to qualify for certain programs because of the lack of being in operation for a long time. So we will be addressing that on economic development as well.
Well, on that point, Mr. Billich, we did that loan program at the beginning of the pandemic, that we were supposed to, it was like a bridge loan for people that were going to get an SBA loan, and then we were supposed to be repaid.
Yep, we were, and I
No,
believe
did we get
repaid
repaid?
the full amount, or we're like within $10,000 of being fully repaid.
Oh, so we have, maybe we could roll that money into something new for like the focused on restaurants, you know.
And that's absolutely the direction I was going with it. But this time actually do it where it's not just a loan program, or maybe yes, do a loan program, but make it very readily accessible, but only for local restaurants that are locally owned, not commercial restaurants that are, either statewide or national. Definitely need to focus on our locally owned mom and pop shops, because that's our locally owned families. That's our local families that have also local staff that get affected in a very big way, and they don't have as much as far as revenues that they can actually fall back on.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, what I'm hearing from, what Mr. Webster said and Mr. Kelly is, and yourself, is there's limited, we don't have many options to control what the health department does, but maybe our focus could be on a safety net for the affected businesses. So I think that's a great idea and something that we should pursue.
Absolutely. And thank you for that one. And you're absolutely right on the safety net portion of it. It's like I mentioned at one of the other meetings, there's other counties that have been paying for restaurants to have tents with heating and providing the cost for it. And they've made deals with different rental companies to make that happen at a cheaper rate, so it doesn't cost their counties as much, but they were able to help them out. So maybe if we have to do that to make everybody happy and try to keep them going and maintaining, that might be the method we might have to take.
Right. Great idea. And I encourage you to pursue it. Okay. With that, is there any other matters to discuss for this evening? Okay. Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Paul. Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Second by Mr. Webster, Mr. Butita. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. The meeting's adjourned. Have a good
Good
evening.
night.
Okay, have a good night,
See you
folks.
tomorrow night.